Hey there guys, this is Root Key Sec and today we are going to do Active Directory Basics Room on Tryhackme. So let's get started. With the task 1, Introduction. Active Directory is a directory service for Windows domain network. What is Active Directory? Active Directory is a collection of machines and servers connected inside of domains that are a collective part of bigger forests of domain that makes up an Active Directory network. So there are a few components we need to remember that are domain controllers, forests, tree and domains. So collection of domains makes up a tree, a collection of trees makes up a forest. All of this part of Active Directory come together to make a big network of machines and server. Why use Active Directory? The majority of large companies use Active Directory because it allows for control and monitoring of the user's computer through a single domain controller. It allows a single user to sign in to any computer on the Active Directory network and have access to his or her stored files and folders in the server, as well as local storage on the machine. This allows for any user in the company to use any machine that the company owns without having to set up multiple users on a machine. Active Directory does it all for you. Let's move on task 2, which is Physical Active Directory. Physical Active Directory is the servers and machine on premise. That can be anything from domain controllers and storage servers to domain user machine. Let's start with domain controller. A domain controller is a Windows server that has Active Directory domain services. @ds is directory services. Let's talk about it later. Installed and has been promoted to a domain controller in the forest. Domain controllers are the center of Active Directory. They control the rest of domain. Active Directory domain services data store. Active Directory data stores hold the database and processes needed to store and manage directory information such as users, groups and services. Below is an outline of some of the contents and characteristics of @ds stores. Now let me emphasize it. ntds.dit is really important file in domain controller. A database that contains all of the information of Active Directory domain controller as well as password hashes for domain users. It is stored by default in %system root %\ntds. It is only accessible by domain controller. So let's start with the answers. What database does the @ds contain? Answer is ntds.dit. Where is the ntds.dit stored? It is stored in %system root %\ntds. What type of machine can be a domain controller? A Windows server can be a domain controller. Let's get started with the task 3, the forest. As we already discussed, forests are the collection of trees and trees are collection of domain. The forest is what defined everything. It is a container that holds all bits and pieces of network together. Without the forest, all of the other trees and domains would not be able to interact. When we say forest, it is only a way of describing connection created between these trees and domains by network. We can already see in the image there is a domain that is called Tryhackme and there are subdomains that is called east and west of Tryhackme. Now the collection of it is known as forest. Let's get to the overview of forest. A forest is a collection of one or more domain tree inside of an Active Directory network. It is what categorizes the part of network as a whole. The forest contains of these parts trees, a hierarchy of domains in Active Directory domain services. Domains used to group and manage objects. Organizational units OUs contain for groups, computers, users, printers and other OUs. Trusts allow user to access resources in other domains. Objects, users, groups, printer and computers shares. Domain services, DNS server, LLM and R, IPv6, domain schema, rules for object creation. What is the term for hierarchy domain in a network? It is called a tree. What is the term for the rule for object creation? It is called domain schema. What is the term for containers group, computers, users, printers and other OUs, organizational units? Let's look at the task 4, which is users and groups. When you create a domain controller, it comes with default groups and two default users, which are administrator and guest. It is up to you to create new user and create new groups to add users. Users overview. There are mainly four types of users, which are domain admins, service accounts, local administrators, and domain users. So domain admins are the big boss. They control the domains and are only ones with access to domain controller. Service accounts. These are for the most part never used except for service maintenance. They are required by Windows for services such as SQL to pair a service with service account. Local administrators. These users can make changes to local machine as an administrator and may even be able to control other normal users, but they cannot access the domain controller. Domain users. These are for everyday users. They can log in on the machine they have the authorized to access and may have local administrator rights to machine depending on the organization. Let's look at the group overview. Groups make it easier to give permission to users and objects by organizing them into groups with specific permission. Types of Active Directory groups, security groups, and there are two overarching types of Active Directory groups, which are security groups and distribution groups. Security groups are used to specify permission for a large number of users, and distribution groups are used to specify email distribution lists. So these are default security groups. Let's skip over to the answers. Which type of group specify user permissions? That are security groups. Which group contains all workstation and servers joined to the domain? Domain computers. Which group can publish certificates to the directory? Cert publisher. Which user can make changes to local machine but not a domain controller? Local administrator. Which group has their passwords replicated to read-only domain controllers? Answer is allowed RODC password replication group. Let's look at the task 5, trusts and policies. Trust and policies go hand in hand to help the domain and trees communicate with each other and maintain security inside of a network. They put the rules in place of how the domain inside of a forest can interact with each other, how an external forest can interact with forest, and the overall domain rules or policies that domain must follow. Let's look at the domain trusts. Trusts are mechanism in place for users in the network to gain access to other resources in the domain. For the most part, trusts outline the way that the domains inside of a forest communicate to each other. In some environments, trust can be extended out to the external domains and even forest in some cases. There are two types of trust that determines how the domain communicate. The first one is directional and other one is transitive. Direction of the trust flows from a trusting domain to a trusted domain. That is called directional, and the trust relationship expands beyond just two domains to include other trusted domain. That is called transitive. Policies are a very big part of Active Directory. They dictate how the server operates and what rules it will and will not follow. You can think of domain policies like domain groups, except instead of permission they contain rules, and instead of only applying to a group of users, the policies apply to a domain as a whole. They simply act as a rulebook for Active Directory that a domain admin can modify and alter as they deem necessary to keep the network running smoothly and securely. So let's look at the answers. What type of trust flows from trusting domains to trusted domains? That is directional. What type of trust expands to include other trusted domains? That is transitive. So that's it for the part 1. In next part we are going to do task 6, 7 and 8. In part 2 we are going to do hands-on lab with the help of PowerView. So stay tuned for it. Bye bye. Do subscribe and never forget like.